Today, let's talk about Glassmorphism 2.0 or Deep Glass. In case you don't know, back in 2021 I created the name Glassmorphism because I found it extremely annoying that all of the companies that are using that frosted glass effect had a different name for it. So I crafted one common term, like an umbrella term, that junior designers can easily search for and learn from. Now with Apple going all glass in their new interfaces, we're gonna see a lot more glass panels. So I believe this is the time that we should start exploring different ways of doing the glass panels, not just that one that came to be a couple years ago. I'll show you how to do the regular glass panels first, and then I'm gonna show you the deep glass effect so you can have some fun and experiment with it. Later this year, I will be making a fully skeuomorphic app using wood and glass as the main materials, just to show you that this is not a style that's completely gone. And I'm gonna share a full case study from that. Today though, let's explore some glass panels. Ready? Let's go!
Hey, welcome to the tutorial. I have 3 different backgrounds here, and we're gonna do a traditional glass panel with all of the things that go into it, and then we're gonna do deep glass on that same set. As you can see, I have this weird meteor kind of object over here, then this very popular 3D colorful layers part. I chose a more muted one because I don't want to go too over the top, and then a traditional living room. Now I'm using Sketch in this particular tutorial, but it's exactly the same in Figma, and one thing that's completely different in Figma, I'm gonna switch to Figma at the end of this video and show you how to do that part, because Figma doesn't have that feature yet. So let's start by creating a new rectangle, and I'm gonna create it right here. Now let's start with the basis of the effect. So I'm not gonna change the colors or the borders yet. I'm just gonna decrease the opacity of the fill to 50%. And then what we do is we add a background blur, and basically the more you blur it, the more blurry the thing underneath becomes. If you want this effect to look nice, you can't go too far because it's gonna be barely visible, but also it cannot be too small because things on top of it won't be readable. So if you want to place some sort of UI on top of that and the blur is pretty little like this, it's just not gonna look good. So blur it until a little bit of that little edge here is still visible, and it should be fine. So now let's make it look better. So I'm gonna start with the corners, and I'm gonna round them to 32 points like this, because most of those glass panels have rounded corners. So what we're gonna start with actually is the borders. Take a look at the object first, and as you can see, it has a shadow on this side over here, and it's a lot lighter on this side, which means that the light source is coming from the top right corner, so from here. So you take the borders here and let's make them into a gradient, and let's pick one of those colors to be almost white, and the other one shouldn't be black or anything, should be just slightly darker gray. And then you can decrease the opacity on both the colors to around 50%. Okay, and now structure it in a way where those shadows act naturally, so they are going in the exact same direction, like this. And if you want, you can make it a thicker line so it's more visible, but if you go thicker, then definitely decrease the opacity of the barely visible one at the bottom. I'm gonna go with 1.5 here. And another thing that's important about this effect, this traditional glassmorphism effect, that it always has to overlap something for it to be visible. Because if you place it in the middle of that orb here, then it doesn't look good because, well, that center is already pretty blurry, so it doesn't really do the effect justice. But if you place it like this on the edge or on another edge like this, it instantly looks a lot better. And I'm gonna place it here so that way that lighter border here is visible. And we can go into the borders and tweak it even more, so just pick that color and maybe make it fully white. Just make sure that it goes at the right angle. So somewhere here should be the line, because this is how the light hits the object. Okay, so we do have some glass effect, it looks pretty good, but of course we can make it better, because it's not just the border that gets that light treatment. So let's go to fills, and let's pick a radial fill, like this. And I'm gonna place the center of that fill here in the top corner where it's lighter, and then kind of stretch it to this side. So first thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna keep that light gray color over here, but I'm gonna decrease the opacity quite a bit on this side. And on this side, I'm gonna make it even lighter, because it's the lightest over here, and just gonna decrease the opacity a tiny bit. And now tweak it in a way where we can go to that second outer color and maybe make it a tiny bit darker. Of course, it's gonna depend on the background as well. But what we want for a natural effect is for this corner to be lighter because the light is coming from here, and then it gets darker the further away it gets. And also it gets a little bit more transparent because when there's more light hitting it, it kind of distorts the surface. So just like that. Let's see, let's go to this color again and even decrease the opacity more. It looks almost great, but it's not really perfect yet. There is a little bit of noise texture because there is some on the actual object, but we should add proper noise textures. So I'm gonna add another fill, and in Figma there should be an option for this as well. Maybe not working exactly the same way, but should be fine. So you add a noise texture, you add a noise layer on top of it, and make sure it's a tiled noise layer, so it's not a fill. And then make it really, really small, because we just want that grain to be small. We don't want it to be completely visible, it's just gonna look bad. So make it small and then decrease the opacity to between 1 and 3%. Let's try 2%. Yeah, and it's pretty good. I'm gonna even go with 1. So it's barely visible, but it's there. Okay, and now the next thing we can do is add a shadow to this element, and we want that shadow to go in the direction of the actual shadow that would be cast here, and then blur it a little bit. And of course, it's a little bit too visible, so I'm just gonna decrease the opacity in quite a big way. All right, and what we want from this shadow is to actually get a little bit of color from the actual object, and then go to saturation and then decrease the saturation, and then of course decrease this part as well. And that way we have a nice looking realistic glass effect. So let's paste it onto this element now. And obviously here the shadow should be just a dark object, and luckily for us it's actually coming from a similar direction. The only difference is that it's coming a little bit more from this right side than from the top right. So I'm just gonna modify it to match, and this part is really important to make that glassmorphism thing work. So grab the borders again, grab it over here, and if the light is pretty strong, you can actually do it in this way, so there's only a tiny bit of that border visible, or you can stretch it all the way so there's more visible over here. And of course, on a background like this, you can make it thinner too. Let's paste this over here now, and here we have something opposite. So first of all, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so it better fits in the room. And here we clearly see that the table casts a shadow from the left to the right, so there's probably windows over here. So now we just have to reverse everything. So just grab this, place it here, reverse it like that, then go to the borders, and probably the windows are a little bit higher than just here, but maybe somewhere here. So just do this border in a way where it's light over here and then gets darker here. And we can decrease the blur a little bit. And for this one, we can remove the shadow completely, because if this is more of a spatial interface, then it probably would be casting a shadow somewhere on the floor over here or on that coffee table. So let's do a coffee table shadow. So you do a line like this, and then make this line a little bit thicker, and then simply blur the line. Just make sure the blur is not really that strong. It should be visible, but not super strong. And when there is a book like this, you need to take this and place this a little bit higher on the book. So as you can see, those lines are not in the same spot, because obviously if the book is on the table, then the shadow would be a little bit higher. And then you can place this other one over here and make it smaller. And then obviously there should also be a shadow on the floor, and this time a little bit darker, to make it visible on that background, and here as well. All right, just in this case we're gonna blur it a little bit more, so it's just kind of barely noticeable, and also make it darker. Okay, and just like that we have a natural looking glass effect. So now let's do the same thing, but with deep glass. So for that I'm gonna create a vertical object like this, because I kind of feel like it looks pretty nice using that effect. And let's just copy all the properties or the style from that first element, because we do want the background blur, we do want the noise texture, and we can use this actual existing part over here. So what I'm gonna start with is I'm gonna place this light background element on the top, and then move this to the bottom more vertically this time, because since this glass is supposedly deeper and larger, it should be easier to manipulate, and also the color wouldn't be really that one-dimensional. So let's just dive in here and remove the border. For now we can keep the shadow, we might modify it later, and we want an inner shadow here, and that inner shadow is going to be completely white at alpha or opacity of 70%, and it's already starting to show. And then for the Y value of the shadow, I'm gonna go with 20 and then 40 for the blur. And generally for most inner shadows or shadows, a good practice is to have the blur double the Y value. Now the order of these inner shadows matter, so I'm gonna add another inner shadow, this time a black one, and this one is gonna have Y equals 4 and blur 4, and the alpha of it is gonna be 50%, which it is, but the difference is that I'm gonna pick that shadow and I'm gonna change the blending mode of it to overlay. And this part is not in Figma, so I'm gonna show you how to do it in Figma in a minute. Okay, let's add another inner shadow on top of that. This one is gonna be Y16 and blur 8, so slightly different, and it's gonna be fully white at 40%. Okay, then let's add another one, and this one is gonna be Y equals 1 with a blur of 8 and also going to be fully white. Let's maybe shrink this a little bit. Now the shadow here is okay, it's just fine because it's using the color from the background a little bit, so I'm just gonna duplicate this so we have more than one, place it over here, and as you can see, this glass element looks like it's a little bit rounded, a little bit more playful. And of course it can't be really used for a lot of typical app scenarios, but it would work for something playful or some little element. I used it in the navigation part of my spatial design interface. Check out that case study to see how you can use things like that as well. Okay, now let's paste and see how it looks like on other backgrounds, and it looks pretty good. The only thing that I'm gonna change here is modify the main shadow to a more dark one. And let's also paste one over here. Maybe let's have it hover, one over here and then one here. And let's go grab our blurry shadows. So this is casting a shadow on this little puffy chair, and this is gonna be casting a shadow on the floor. Just move it until it looks natural, because sometimes it takes a while to find the right spot for that shadow. And obviously the object itself doesn't need a drop shadow anymore, so it's gonna be simpler that way. And you can play with the background blur to maybe decrease it a little bit based on the background itself. It still has to be readable, it still has to be visible, so in this case we can decrease it a tiny bit to preserve a little bit of that effect. And as you can see, it looks different on the edges because they are this inner shadow thing. Okay, and here comes the last part. Sketch has a function to increase or decrease the saturation of what's under the blurred background. So if we decrease it, it's just gonna be black and white underneath. But if we increase it to the max, it's actually going to amplify the lightness, and that looks really good. So let's do it in all of those, and I'm gonna show you how to do it in Figma in a second. And I like increasing it to the maximum levels, but then play around with the blur so it doesn't interfere. But it gives you this nice, vibrant option over here. And same here, let's increase it to the max. And without sacrificing readability, it actually kind of makes this element feel like it's more in the real space because it's doing something with the light. So just tweak this to match. And we're done. Okay, so I'm in Figma pasting in our background, and I'm gonna quickly recreate on just this one background this whole element. So one more time, I'm gonna go to the fill. Let's do a linear fill. Let's do a radial fill actually. Again, I'm gonna start at the top with the light one, and it's gonna fade down to the bottom a little bit, but that top is also going to be slightly transparent. Okay, looking good. I'm gonna round the corners completely, and let's add this background blur. Blur it a little bit more, and let's add all of those inner shadows. So inner shadow 1, they used to be just fully white at 70%, and Y equals 20, blur 40. All right, getting there. And this is gonna be the black one with the overlay mode. So for now, I'm gonna skip this one and just go to the next white one. So this one is FFF at 40% with Y16 and blur 8. All right. And then the last inner shadow is also gonna be white at 70% with Y equal 1 and a blur of 8, and it's starting to look pretty good. But that's okay, we do have our element. looks pretty good, but if you switch to Sketch, you'll realize that we don't have this nice looking effect of the background popping out. So how to do it in Figma? Well, there is no option built in to do that, but you can still do it. So one thing that I'm gonna do is duplicate this whole element, and I'm gonna remove the background blur and all those inner shadows from underneath there, and I'm gonna change this element to overlay and simply add a white background over here. So let me just show you what we have here. We have just that shape over here. When I hide it, it's gone. We have just that shape in full blending mode overlay, fully white, 100% opacity, and this is placed underneath our main shape. Okay, but we also had an inner shadow that was completely black that added to this whole effect that we wanted, something a little bit like this. So I'm gonna do this inner shadow again, and it had Y and the blur equals 4, like this, fully visible. But for the effect to shine through, you actually want it first pretty strong like this. Okay, now let's place this on top, and it seems to be shining through exactly how we wanted it. So just like this, you can still achieve this nice deep glass effect and play around with it. This can be nice for floating buttons or simple menus, both vertical and horizontal, because it also can work like this. And it can have a couple of icons over here, or even a button that you need to press with some message displayed above this. And this works great if it's merged with traditional glassmorphism, but it's just a nice way to play around with materials, and if it doesn't fit your UI, that's completely perfectly fine, but you can still use it for graphics design. It looks pretty cool. So yeah, enjoy, have fun, and experiment.
Sure, Apple obviously tested a lot of potential options for this. They definitely explored a lot of different materials for maximum immersion, readability and everything. But you know what? That doesn't mean that we should completely accept it as the only way to go. That's not how design works. It's all about experimenting. You can use what they created as a base, and obviously it's a pretty strong base with good foundations. That's good. But then try new things. Try to get outside of that comfort zone and just do cool shit. Because playing with materials and exploring stuff like that can lead to really interesting results. So subscribe if you haven't, and obviously have a beautiful day.